Hello, this is TechMan88, and I've got kind of a cool thing that you can do with armor stands and cloning, and I'll just show you right now. So I just summoned all these armor stands with just a couple commands right here. Summons them in with equal spacing. Right now they're set to 8 blocks apart. And then I have a command over here which is just going to clone in this little sliver of a farm right here. This is Ilmango's creeper farm. And you can see it neatly copied everything over here with zero effort. I didn't have to do any math and calculate all the coordinates, fill in a bunch of clone commands and command blocks. So now I can run the whole thing, and you can see it filled in this entire creeper farm just with almost no effort. So this would be useful when you don't want to go into MCEdit, or maybe you're in a version that doesn't have MCEdit support, like 1.13, or maybe you're on a server and you want to test something out with other people without shutting down the server, reloading the level after using MCEdit. So yeah, that's the basic gist of it. And yeah, then I have a bunch of command blocks out here just to clear stuff. And this can be fairly laggy, and that's actually why I have this roof above, because that minimizes some of the light updates. And this is just at Y level 71. So if you raise it up to ceiling height, that can be a pretty big issue. But that ceiling pretty much solves it for the most part. Okay, so this is the sequence of commands that summons in the armor stands. And the first thing it's going to run is it's going to teleport the armor stands 8 blocks in the Z direction, and the Z direction is over in this direction. So yeah, first it moves the previous ones over, and then the next thing it's going to do is summon in armor stands at heights right here. So 31, 59, 35, that's going to be the one down here. And I have a couple levers up here. Like if I just wanted to summon them in the middle layer, I would run it like that. And yeah, that'll just let me do the middle layer, one layer at a time. But this is just a nice simple way to easily clone multiple layers. So that's that part. Summon ins at equal intervals. And this one right here, this controls the interval, that tilde 8. That's 8 blocks in the Z direction. So then this one over here, I can just run it once for one sliver. It's going to first there's just this blank command block. That's kind of a trick you can do if you just need a command block. I wanted 2 command blocks facing into this chain command. So I can have the repeat command that I'll execute every game tick, and I have another one that I can just run once using the impulse. So yeah, this one does nothing. Then I have a bunch of ones that they have this need redstone thing checked. All of these down here, so I can flick the levers and selectively execute these. And this is the more complicated command. It uses, this might be a 1.13 feature, I'm not sure. It's execute as. Then it does these selectors. This one just picks out all the armor stands and then tells it to run it at the position of the armor stand. And when you do that, you can use these tildes to get the position of the armor stand. So it's going to move the armor stands along. You can see they've moved up to this position, and if I run it one more time, it's going to fill in the blocks and then move the armor stands once more in the X direction. So that's what this command over here does. Teleports. It's the same format, exact same as the previous one, but it has a teleport command to teleport the armor stand one more in the X direction. And that's, if you ever heard of the very old program called Turtle, I think it is, it's kind of like that. You're just moving these kind of cursors along and copying and stuff at each position. That's a very old reference. And I'll get into this last command a little bit later. But that's pretty much the gist of it. You can probably figure out most of the possibilities you can do with this. But there's a couple more that I guess I'll show you right now. Alright, so the entity selectors are kind of complicated. You have some options, and one pretty interesting one to use with this is this distance selector. So you can tell it to execute for only entities within a certain radius. And I'm going to set this up now to do a slightly different command. And I gotta turn off this lever, turn on this one, and I have to set the intervals properly. Okay, so now I'll summon in the armor stands, and I'll clear out the previous blocks. Actually, I need just one layer of armor stands for this. Or I don't really need that. So, yeah, put in that, and then let's hope this works. Okay, yeah, so there it is. You can actually draw circles with this. You can even draw donuts, I guess. I can quickly try and make it do that. So it's using this distance like .20. That just says within 20, but I can say like, let's say 15 to 25. So clear the blocks again, set up the armor stands, and then I can run it. And yeah, there you go. There's a donut. And of course this is made in completely vanilla Minecraft with no mods, no external editors, and 1.13. And by the way, I think a lot of these commands are in earlier versions, but they might have a slightly different format. And I think 1.13 did generally improve the entity selectors. So yeah, if you know a lot more about that, you might have some luck. But I think the radius one is, or the distance one is probably the most useful if you want to do something like this. And just real quick, I set up another example, just filling in using the setBlock command instead, and I'll run that now. So this is like another possible pattern you can get, but you can see I didn't change the intervals at all. So I'll change those now to 1, and this will get me a more exact circle. And yeah, that's the same command as before, but I'll run that again. Oops. I screwed something up. Oh yeah. That has to be 1. Okay, that looks summoned in properly now. Yeah, I guess I screwed up this one too. So yeah, there you get more perfect donut. And it does get laggy. You can see those lag spikes there. There's not really a lot you can do about that. I think Carpet Mod might have a feature to lessen some of those light updates, but they aren't too bad, I guess. And you can combine that with like the triple layer. You can add more layers if you want. That should be pretty easy to do. So now I'll do it with triple layers. And one thing you can kind of see right here is that it's not actually the cylinder that you probably would like. Is actually a sphere. There's nothing I can do about that. That's what the entity selectors support. They only support a sphere. And additionally, you have to specify the X, Y, and Z position to use. I didn't actually put the Y position. It's going to default to the same as this command block. And that's just the way it is. Alright, now I'll set up another example of a sugarcane farm. So if I'm doing this, one thing I have to do is change the width of the farm, because this is 5 wide instead of like 1 wide, which I was doing a second ago. So now, some is in the armor stands, of course, and I'll just test one sliver of it just to make sure it's working. That looks good. And I'll summon in the armor stands again just to get them to the beginning. Then I'll test the 3 levels, just one sliver of 3 levels, and that looks good. And you can notice here that these are 3 wide instead of 1 wide or 2 wide. So now I can generate the entire farm, and this might possibly crash. It happened once. I'm going to try and turn off do tile drops, because I think the problem when you're doing something like this is that it might accidentally break off some sugar canes in the process, because it's trying to run those observers. Yeah, this is ridiculously slow, but it's not crashing, at least so far. Yeah, I actually I screwed something up there. I didn't use the right X interval. That is an annoying part of this. It's kind of unavoidable, but I can pretty easily just run that whole thing again. And I'll just pause this until it's done. Alright, so it finished. And you can see this farm doesn't have a bottom, and that's kind of a problem maybe if you want to be testing this. So what I have here is a more advanced command, and what this command does is it uses another part of the entity selector, this tag thing. So I've tagged the lowest armor stands with this tag lowest level, and I have a command to clone a bit underneath that formation that I showed, and I clone it at y-3, and it's cloning the 3 blocks below what's already set up here. So yeah, there's all this stuff missing down here, which is the item transport. So now when I run this, gotta resummon the armor stands, of course. Now when I run this, it should put the item transportation below it. And again, it's extremely laggy. But it did work. I just have this simple setup down here to send out the items, and I turned off the do tile drops. And that's just to try and prevent some of the lag associated with destroying all these blocks. It seems to destroy the blocks from the bottom up. So when it, say, destroys this dirt blocks, destroys the blocks from the bottom up, so when it destroys this block, it's going to create a lot of entities and probably a lot of particles as well. So that just kind of prevents it. And soon we should start seeing them come out. Actually, I screwed up another part. This is another annoying part, is that you have to adjust the Y intervals here. Oops. That was way off. So 63 and then 67. And unfortunately, I just have to run this again. I'll just run one tile to try and make sure everything is alright. And I'll turn off do tile drops and run it again. So it looks like it's all done, and it should start spitting out the sugar cane right now. So yeah, this does work. You can see sugar cane is spitting out. Now a little bit more about using the tags on this is so tag equals lowest level without quotes over here on the entity selector, and then to actually tag those entities over here, the things on the armor stand are no gravity equals 1. That's something I didn't mention before, but you basically don't want the armor stands falling down, and that seems to disable a lot of the physics. They can still get pushed by pistons. I'll try and cover that later, but then tags equals then the brackets and quotes around lowest level. It's the JSON format, if you're wondering. So yeah, that's just on the lowest level, and these don't have that tag. And you can tag these with other things and select them with that if you'd like to try that. But it starts to get pretty complicated, and at some point it's probably not worth using this technique. So if you do want to use something besides armor stands, you can do this. I found one entity that you can use instead. It's the area effect cloud. The benefit of the area effect cloud is that it can't be pushed by pistons. So yeah, I can turn on bounding boxes now, and that can't be pushed by pistons. And an interesting note, this actually triggers tripwire hooks. So that's just an interesting thing. It might be considered a bug, But yeah, the area effect clouds, they're not as visible as armor stands, and that's pretty much the main reason that I used armor stands, because they're nice and big and you can interact with them if you'd like. You can kill them just by clicking. Alright, I'm going to end the video now just with remaking the Elmigo farm. And when you do this, you want to make sure of a couple things. You want to check the X interval, the Y interval, and the Z interval. So this is the Z interval here, and this is 8. And I'm just reviewing this because this is important to get right if you don't want to make the mistakes I was making. And you want to check the Y values here. Just make sure they're where you want them. This is the one part where you have to do a tiny bit of math, adding a couple numbers, but it isn't bad. So that's 59, and then 62, and then 65. And then the final one you want to check is the interval over here is correct, because when you run one of these things, it can take a fair amount of time. So yeah, I just checked one sliver right there, and then I can run the entire thing. And something this simple is pretty quick. I think this is probably the best for testing mob farms, because some of the other farms, they can get pretty laggy with destroying the items. But yeah, this is that. I'll leave it in this setup when I put up the world download. Now, just a final note, I gotta give a little bit of credit to xisumavoid. He came up with some inspiration for this. What he did is he made a way to use armor stands to clear out a bunch of land, because you can't use a giant fill command to clear land. That'll crash the server unless you're using carpet mod. But yeah, he did, I think, come up with this idea, and he's not usually the person to come up with really crazy things like this, but yeah, credit due where credit is deserved. And I don't know his video, I tried to find it, but if I do find it eventually, I will post a link in the description. I'll also try and put some stuff in the description about these commands. I'll just copy and paste some of them, because they can be kind of hard to dig up all the information for 1.13, because a lot of stuff changed. A lot of little things in the format, I think, changed across versions. Anyways, I think you'll probably find this pretty useful if you're trying to develop some new farms. There might not be a whole lot of this going on right now, but I think it's pretty awesome just to be able to clone stuff with this ease. And you might even have some fun as a builder if you want to like copy and paste some pattern over a large area, like I demonstrated earlier with this 2x2 pattern. Just copied that into a circle. I'm not even sure you can do that so easily with some of the advanced editors. Anyway, thank you for watching, and goodbye. So just a bit of an addendum here. I planned to end the video, but I thought of some more ideas that I would show real quick. So one is to summon this huge array of armor stands. There are 600 armor stands, and then I can really quickly run one of these commands and create a sphere. You have a lot more kind of control with this type of method. You can make more precise shapes like this if you're going to try and do it with armor stands in vanilla. And I'll show you how I make the armor stands, which is probably the more interesting part of this. So you can see it's making the array kind of like this, and this is kind of a hard thing to do. Like if you're trying to use scoreboards to do this, it would not work. Actually, I don't know of any way that you can access like a value from the scoreboard to get a Y value. The way it does it is it has a single armor stand down there. I'll stop it to show you. So it summons this armor stand down here, and this has a special tag, and it's going to keep moving that armor stand up, and every time it does that, it is also going to clone it basically. At that position, it's going to summon another armor stand with another tag, so that it can tell between them. And this is the first command. It teleports the first armor stand up. I have it tagged as spawner. Then the next one, it summons an armor stand at that spawner position, just using the execute command. And then it adds this additional tag, Z direction. That's just what I chose. And then when it gets to the top here, it just checks, uses a distance selector, and it's going to teleport that one down to the bottom. And whenever it does that, you can tell by the shape of this arrow right here, it's going to teleport that entire row of z direction over. And that's a really simple algorithm. It's probably just to look at it. I doubt you would actually want to do it quite like this, but I'll reuse this part for something a little more useful and practical. The problem with doing it like this, although it works very quickly, it can very quickly fill in the entire shape. The problem, obviously, is that you have so many armor stands, and you just multiply the height and the width of this array right here, and you'll quickly get way more than your computer can handle. Already up to 600 right now, and it can barely even do this tiny sphere, if this is what you want to do. Not that there's a lot of practical purpose to this. But next I'll show you a little more practical example. I'll just turn this off, and then I can rerun this right here. It's just going to recreate the same thing. There is a nice advantage to this, is that you can easily reset the armor stands back to where they were, and then I can clear everything out and then quickly run that again. And it is fairly fast like this. Only disadvantage is, of course, the entity count. And I'll go up and look at that real quick. You can tell it's a pretty good sphere. But that's about as big as you can make it with an array of armor stands this small. Now this is the next example, which should be pretty scalable. You should be able to make it pretty big. This is only using 120 entities. And I'm going to continue running it, and I'm just using it right now to clear out this sphere. Just using a bunch of set block commands. And it's fairly fast. I think if you're going to take the time to design something like this, you're not really going to mind waiting for this sort of contraption to happen. So I can stop it with that, and I'll recreate the armor stand array right now. And it's basically doing the same thing that I showed just a second ago, but it's only doing it on this 2-high array right here. And I can stop it with this, and then rerun it again, but this time I'm going to have it create the sphere. And I didn't quite do that right. This is kind of a flaw. Turn that off. Turn this off. Actually, leave that on. Now I'm going to make it so it's not so excessively big. And yeah, it's just creating that sphere. You might be able to do something a little more complicated. I might try and figure out some more interesting things you can do than just create a sphere. You can obviously create donuts and everything that I showed, like in the original setup that I showed. But yeah, this is a vanilla way to make a nice sphere of any material you want. Now I was just running that with 2 high slices, but I can edit a few things here. I can say run it with like 5 high slices, and then I have to edit another thing over here. Maybe not that one. Yeah, I have to edit this one, and now I can recreate those armor stands, and it's doing basically the same thing. And that's just really nice that you can just change a couple of values and make this run with like pretty completely different parameters. It's a lot easier than what I was doing over here, where I had to look at these values and individually adjust them. Although it's a bit slower, that's really not an issue. So now when I run this, it's going to be a lot faster. It's going to skip up 5 times with each step. And I'm not creating the sphere now, but I can turn that on just right in the middle of it. And then turn it off. Turn it back on. Now I'm going to rerun this using a slightly more advanced thing that I just designed to create multiple spheres at once, and I'm just erasing my testing right now, and I'll show you something kind of funny you can do if you turn both of these on at once. You can make kind of a stupid looking pattern. It looks kind of neat, I think, with the teleporting of the armor stands being smooth. But yeah, it's pretty pointless, and yet did something stupid. Okay, so now I'll create for Sirius, and that looks wide enough. And then I made this more advanced command over here, which is going to, it's a pretty long command. I hate that this is just a single line editor. You can press Control and then the arrow keys to skip across faster. But basically I made another type of armor stand, and I tagged it with a special tag. And it's going to, for each of those armor stands, it's going to find every one of those Z direction armor stands, and on each one it's going to run a set block command, just all the ones that it finds within this 5 to 10 block radius. So that's going to create a spherical donut, basically a shell. So now I'll run it and I hope it works, and these are the armor stands that are going to create the spheres. It's looking pretty good. Now you should see the inside of this part come up. And it's not the fastest thing in the world. You can look at the tick rate. I guess it's not so slow. You could run it on a server without too much problems, because it's only running for this one line at a time, and it's only doing one layer. So it shouldn't run into a whole lot of excessive light updates. But yeah, that's I think that's kind of cool. It might be kind of a practical use for this. Now on how I did some of this, I saw this video from Logan111. It was very helpful for the whole conditional command stuff. One thing that I learned there was that first, that these conditional command blocks, they have a different shape than normal command blocks. So yeah, this is conditional, and then this one is unconditional. So that's pretty good visual reference. I had no idea. I've looked at these a lot and I didn't know. But I'll just leave a link in the description for his video. He did some pretty cool stuff using test block and all that kind of stuff. He made Pascal's triangle using kind of a similar armor stand technique, but it wasn't nearly as fast. He had to step along an entire row to create that. So I'll go through a couple of the details of the redstone over in this area, just as I'm clearing out what I just created. Now this over here on the very left of it, this is going to, the first thing it's going to do is run this impulse command and then run a couple chain commands which are dependent on this impulse command. And that's how chain commands work. Not many people probably use them that much. But yeah, that's what this initial part does. And then this redstone, it powers this block and then powers this repeating block, and that's going to trigger the whole thing where it iterates that armor stand up and summons a new armor stand at each position. And I went over to that before. It's basically the same. And then this one over here starts with the repeating command block again. And then like this one, it's going to teleport along the X direction, which is away from me, where I'm facing in this direction. It's the red axis, by the way. X, Y, Z, RGB, they're the same thing. It's pretty common in graphics. And this one, it tests if any armor stand is with the Z direction tag is 100 blocks away or more, and it limits it to 1. And the reason it does that is because it doesn't want to execute this multiple times. And it just runs, say, iterate, just a message. And then the next one, it it teleports them back towards me in this direction, and teleports them up 2 blocks as well. So it's teleporting them back and teleporting them up in that iteration. So it's 2 layers high of armor stands, and so it teleports them up to armor stands, so it covers the entire area. This one right here, it just sets the block at each armor stand to air, and that's just to clear everything out that was there before. This is just an easier way to do than like an if-else statement. That's just very awkward with these command blocks. This one is just the basic test, and I can disable it. You can see it says needs redstone, so I can flip these levers off and on to control that. So that's the big sphere in the middle. And then this one, I showed it before. For each of those special armor stands with the tag sphere here, it will execute for all armor stands that it finds. It's going to run the set block command at that position. So this is a very inefficient way to do it, but I think it's about all you can do in Minecraft. But it does work, and it's kind of like a interesting thing to do. Probably pointless, but who knows. And in some ways it is pointful. What I showed in the beginning with testing out some of these designs over here, I think that is quite a useful use of this. But I just wanted to cover this just for posterity or whatever. And I'll just go inside them, kind of look at them. Alright, I wanted to cover a little more detail on what I said about area effect clouds. So I can summon in one right here, just using a command, this right here, so I can run it like that. It's just a flame. Those are pretty easy to see. So you can see it's not triggering the tripwire hook, but when I go in there, it's going to trigger it, turn on those lights. And I can delete that with that, and you can see it turned off those lights. And you can see this is working properly when I stand in it, but when I put an area effect cloud in there, it's just going to stay on. I really don't know why that is, but when it does get deleted, it does turn off the tripwire hook. So that's pretty weird. I don't think it's really a major bug, probably not even worth fixing, but it's an interesting behavior that might reveal some secrets about the code or something. So the reason I bring up area effect clouds is the nice thing about them is that you can't push them. But with an armor stand, you can push them. So with an armor stand, I'm going to summon that now with no gravity. And of course I can push that. So that could be a problem in some farms where you might have a tripwire hook that can push the armor stand and screw up your whole thing. So if you're really having problems with that, you can just use the area effect clouds, and those will be immune to that. And the command here is summon area effect cloud, and you don't need this flame thing right here, but the age -1000 or something like that. That'll give you some time to work with it before it disappears. But I think armor stands should be sufficient. Just position your stuff wisely, and you shouldn't have any problems with that kind of issue. So if you want to run this, pay attention to these 2 command blocks right here, these 2 levers. So this command block right here, this is going to create a big sphere. Just one of the 2 examples I set up. So I can flip that off, and then I can try and create some of the custom spheres, but I don't have any of those set up. So the way you do that is you come in here and you just copy this command, and then we come over here somewhere and just paste that in, and that'll summon the correct armor stand. So now when I continue this kind of algorithm over here, it's going to start creating those spheres. So that's the basic gist of it. I don't know if anybody will even bother with this world download. This world download with this additional stuff, this is going to be separate just because I made the other part of the video before this, and I want to make sure that that works. I don't want to try and combine stuff with some risk. So yeah, you would start with this, of course, to create the armor stands, and then once you got enough so you're satisfied, then you can run this, and it'll just run that for those slices that you've picked out. But everything should work in this second world download. Alright, I'm finally going to end the video here. I'm just going to end off with, I checked out this stuff over here. It still should work, but I will still provide the 2 world downloads. And I'm just going to use these armor stands to clear out the area, because I was just testing whether this creeper farm still works, and recreate a big sphere. So, yeah, it's kind of cool. Not something you probably normally see. And you can probably hear a lot of these tripwire hooks getting exploded or whatever. I think that's just a consequence of how it deletes stuff and recreates it. Like the clone command, it doesn't seem to fill everything in atomically, if you're familiar with that word. So it fills one block at a time. But yeah, I'm just going to leave it about like this when I upload it. And I will, of course, stop it. So there you go. A lot of different stuff, and I hope you enjoy this video, and goodbye.